Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're diving into the mind of one of the 20th century's most brilliant theologians, Joseph Ratzinger. You probably know him as Pope Benedict XVI. He saw this huge modern gap between science and faith and thought, there's got to be a way to fix this. And his solution? It involved building a bridge all the way back to an ancient Greek idea.
All right, so here's our game plan. First, we're going to look at the problem Ratzinger was trying to solve. Then, we'll get into his really cool answer, which he pulled from ancient philosophy. And stick around, because we'll see how this whole thing connects back to his own life in a pretty amazing way.
First up, a crisis of faith. You know, it feels like a modern problem, but it has some really deep roots. So how did we even get here? How did we get to a place where faith and reason feel like they're on opposite teams?
I mean, think about it. So many people today feel like they have to pick a side, right? It's like you're either team science or team religion. You've got your empirical, testable worldview over here and your religious, faith-based one over there. And the idea that these two could not just get along but actually make each other stronger, yeah, for a lot of folks, that sounds completely impossible.
So where did this split come from? To really get it, we need to rewind the clock a bit and talk about a philosophical revolution that honestly changed everything, the Enlightenment.
Okay, so in German, the Enlightenment is called Aufklärung. And this movement, well, it put human reason up on a pedestal. It was all about using your own brain as the ultimate authority. Their motto was sapere aude, which basically means dare to know or dare to use your own reason. It was this super powerful call to just question everything and only trust what you could prove with hard evidence.
And look, this new way of thinking was a game changer. I mean, it led to incredible breakthroughs in science and politics, you name it. But, and this is a big but for Ratzinger, this super tight focus on only what we can measure and test, well, he saw it as pushing faith into a corner. It created a real crisis. Suddenly, if you couldn't prove something in a lab, it was basically seen as irrational or just outdated.
And this quote right here, it just hits the nail on the head. Ratzinger called it a philosophical homelessness of faith. What a powerful image, right? Belief had lost its home. It didn't have a legitimate place to stand intellectually in a world that was getting more and more obsessed with just one very specific type of reason.
All right, so what's the fix? Well, instead of just throwing out the Enlightenment and saying reason is bad, Ratzinger did something really clever. He went digging way back in history, searching for a richer, bigger idea of what reason could even be.
And what he found was this incredible ancient Greek concept, logos. Now, when you hear logos, don't just think logic or calculation. For the ancient Greeks, it was so much more. It was the underlying rational blueprint of the entire cosmos. It's the reason the universe makes sense at all. The very thing that makes it understandable to us.
And this wasn't some obscure idea. It has a fascinating journey. It kicks off with Greek philosophers like Heraclitus, who saw logos as this universal governing principle. But then, the early Christians did something totally radical. They took this big philosophical idea and said, that's not just a principle, that's a person. It's right there at the start of the Gospel of John. In the beginning was the Logos. And later, thinkers like Justin Martyr made it crystal clear. They believed this cosmic reason was actually incarnate in Jesus Christ.
Okay, so how does this ancient Greek word help with the modern problem of the Enlightenment? This is where Ratzinger's genius really shines. He unpacked logos into 5 different meanings, showing how this one little word could be big enough to hold both science and faith.
This is the core of his solution, so let's walk through it. For Ratzinger, logos is, first, the creative reason behind the universe, the very order that scientists study. But it's also, second, the Son of God, a real person in history, Jesus. And because of that, number 3, it means that the ultimate reality is personal, not just some random anonymous force. Fourth, he says logos is also love, the very bond holding everything together. And finally, number 5, it's the spoken word, a message that we can actually hear. It's all of those things at once.
You see what he did there? By making reason, this logos, so big and multi-layered, he built a framework where everything has a place. Suddenly, science and faith aren't at war. They're just different paths up the same mountain. A physicist studying the Big Bang is actually exploring that creative reason, and a theologian studying Scripture is encountering the Logos as a person. In Ratzinger's mind, they're both on the same quest, just using different tools.
And that brings us to our last section, reuniting faith and reason. And this part is just it's a beautiful way to tie it all together, because Ratzinger's own life story becomes a powerful metaphor for his entire project.
So get this, Ratzinger was born on a very specific day, Holy Saturday. That's the day in the Christian calendar that sits right between the total darkness of the crucifixion on Good Friday and the bright hope of the resurrection on Easter Sunday. It's a day of silence, of waiting. And he saw his own life, and really the whole human condition, in that. We all live in that in-between space, don't we? A little bit of doubt, a little bit of hope, a mix of darkness and light.
And this quote from him just says it all. For Ratzinger, faith isn't about having everything figured out. It's not about erasing every last bit of doubt. It's about being okay with living in the mystery, what he calls the hiddenness of God. His whole way of thinking makes space for those times when God seems silent, when things don't make sense. It's a faith that doesn't need the same kind of absolute certainty that a science experiment does.
So when you boil it all down, what was Ratzinger's vision? His goal was never to tear down science or reason. Not at all. It was to expand our idea of what reason is. He was arguing that a truly reasonable worldview has to make room for more than just data. It has to include love and creativity and personal relationships. So for him, faith isn't some blind leap in the dark. It's a perfectly reasonable trust in that deeper, richer reality he called logos.
And so that leaves us with a big question to chew on. Ratzinger's work really challenges every single one of us, no matter what we believe. It forces us to ask, in a world that's so focused on science and data, is there still a place for a deeper kind of reason? When you say you're being reasonable, what do you really mean by that? And more importantly, what might you be leaving out of the picture?